The whole project had to do with a person with dementia and their caregiver joining in together actively, singing every week, rehearsing, and every 12 weeks having a concert where we would present to families and friends and the community.
I must say, I really cried because I watched Donald enjoy something so profoundly, and just looking at him enjoy that was absolutely the most valuable thing to me.
NICO, which stands for the National Intrepid Center of Excellence, it began as a 4-week intensive outpatient program for active duty service members with traumatic brain injury and underlying psychological health conditions. Many of the service members coming through have a very difficult time verbalizing what they've been through, and this is due to an actual physiological change that occurs in the brain after either a traumatic brain injury or a traumatic moment in general that results in PTSD.
They're really looking to express their experiences in a new way. And sometimes they've been in other therapy programs for quite some time and just feel like they are stuck. They're not quite able to get there by putting words to what they're trying to talk about, or they're not able to express their experiences that way. And so for many people, being able to put something into an image is completely fresh and different.
Making my quilt, I had so many emotions. I thought about my trauma, the combat trauma, and through the combat trauma, how anxiety, depression, and all these feelings came to me. So I showed it to my mentor. She knew that I really wasn't myself, and if I could put on a mask, I could make it through anything.
When they're moving to the music, they even sometimes forget they have Parkinson's. What dance helps do is it helps create bridges across these circuits.
Did you know how to dance before you started this program?
No, I never danced in my life.
What our research really hopes to provide is a neural map of people who are dancing with Parkinson's.
First time really, I'm enjoying my retirement in many ways. I see the therapeutic effects of it, anticipate it. It's like learning a whole new language. I've learned to be able to express myself in dance, which is something that totally abstract and foreign to me before this.
Thank you, and welcome. I'm so happy that you were able to join us today and that you've agreed to be indoors despite this gorgeous day. Our Arts and Wellness panel with NeuroArts Blueprint is an exciting first for us, and we're delighted to be here with you. I'm going to introduce everybody first. Second in from the left is Susan Magsamen. She's the founder and executive director of Johns Hopkins International Arts and Mind Lab. Her body of work lies at the intersection of brain sciences and the arts, and how our unique response to aesthetic experiences can amplify human potential. She's the co-director of NeuroArts Blueprint, and she has a new book out that's been on the bestseller list of the Times, Your Brain on Art. Many of you already know Dr. Francis Collins, 16th director of the National Institutes of Health, the NIH, the largest supporter of biomedical research in the world. He served for 12 years under an unprecedented 3 administrations. Special advisor for special projects to President Biden, most recently, and to help eliminate hepatitis C. Dr. Emmeline Edwards, Director of Division of Extramural Research of the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. Fortunately, that's also NCCIH. She's responsible for development of scientific programs or areas of science that fulfill NCCIH's mission, as well as planning implementation, and policy. We'll hear more about that. Spearheaded NIH Toolkit for Music and Health Research. And lastly, David Leventhal, founding teacher and program director for Dance for PD, which you just heard about, a program of the Mark Morris Dance Group that's been used as a model for classes in more than 300 communities in 25 countries. He leads classes for people living with Parkinson's disease around the world and trains other teaching artists in the Dance for PD approach. And he's going to start with us today and share his expertise on movement and health.
I don't think our moderator introduced herself.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. I'm Renée Fleming, and I love all of this work, and I'm so excited to be with these extraordinary people today. So thank you, thank you. I also sing, but not today.
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's great to see all of you here. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're going to start with a little bit of movement that we're going to do together. And the reason for that is that I think one of the best ways to understand how music and the arts influence health is by engaging in it ourselves. And since you weren't asked to bring your own musical instruments, we're going to use our own instrument of the body to do this. So I'm going to teach you a very short movement phrase from a piece of choreographer Mark Morris. The piece is called Falling Downstairs, and it was a collaboration with a cellist, Yo-Yo Ma, setting each of the 6 Bach cello suites to different art forms. This one was dance. So you're going to learn a little bit of that, and then we're going to look and see how music starts to provide the sauce, the glue, the cream, the butter, the deliciousness that holds the movement together and that makes it sit within our hearts and within our bodies. So join with me in whatever way is comfortable for you. You're going to start by reaching to one side, and it's almost like you're dipping your hands in a little bowl of warm water or an inkwell, one of those old-fashioned inkwells. And you're going to take it to the other side, and you're going to open your hands like you're offering a gift to somebody and bring it back to your heart. So let's try that one more time. You're reaching your hands down, and you're opening that gift, and now you're doing a little flourish that second time. As all artists, Mark likes to build in little variations that make it interesting. So that little flourish happens the second time. Then you're going to reach up, and it's like one of those Jacob's Ladder games where the wooden slats kind of go side to side. Look how beautiful that is already, right? So reaching up, side, side. That third one creates a little helicopter movement over your hand. You're going to poke that hand up. It drops back down, and this hand has its revenge by punching that other one to the side. And that's our whole phrase. Let's try that second part because it's a little tricky. So up, you're reaching to the side, creating kind of like a half T shape, and then there's that helicopter, beautiful. Poke it up and punch it around, and you're going to come back to here. Great. Now, I tried to teach that very amusically, which is hard for me because music is part of everything I do, but we had no rhythm. We just kind of learned the moves. I want to try that now with a metronome. So this is the very fundamental beat that we all live with because this is our heartbeat. Our heartbeat, yeah, we might feel like we have music in our heart, but really it's just going like this. So that metronome is part of us. Let's try this movement now with just the metronome. 5, 6, here we go. Little flourish. Should we try that again? Open your hands, bring it back, dip, dip, circle, in, rise, high, 2, 3, you're doing great. Poke, down, punch. Quick learners, excellent. Did you all get the tape ahead of time or something? That was great. All right, so just be aware of how you felt in that. It was nice to have something to hold us together. It was nice to have a beat, but there wasn't very much going on in the middle. We didn't have any kind of emotion. We didn't have any kind of subbeats or melody or anything that made our heart sing. So we're now going to try that same movement with the actual music it was choreographed to. Let's see how it changes for us. Bach, please. Nice. Really hear the contours of how it affects the movement. So there's a drop. Woo. Right. High. And woo. Good. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. That was great. So totally holds it. How did it feel for you? Better? Better than the metronome, right? Kind of just gives it that extra thing. And what's nice is that we start having a relationship with the music. We can hear when that cellist makes choices, a little rubato here, a little bit of emphasis there, an accent, and we can incorporate that into our body. Now, just because it was choreographed to that doesn't mean we have to stay with that. So music can also provide an incredibly quick change, spontaneous change of mood, of emotion, of feeling, simply by changing the track. We're going to try that same movement now to some traditional Irish dance music. I chose this because it is made for dance, so we're going to see if this movement fits to it and how it makes us feel versus the other versions. One more. This is the Caledonian. Let's try that again. Good, that's great. It's hard not to get carried. Perfect. Beautiful. So different ways that music can completely change how we dance, how we feel, how we interact. I saw even that last version, more smiles, more openness, more play, just by changing the music. Movement did not change. We're going to try one more thing before I sit down, and this is actually a group activity. I want us to imagine one of our dancers talked about music being a red carpet that rolled out in front of him. And living with Parkinson's, having that red carpet of music support his movement was so, so important to him. The other thing he talked about was when dancers move their arms, it looks like they're swans. So we talk a lot about the imagery of the movement and the way that the imagery actually supports a focus on quality, the how are we moving, the artistry of that movement. So I thought, well, let's take that theme of swan and play some very familiar music about a swan, and we're going to flap our wings. Now, some of you are here and not at the Nationals game. So because of that, we're going to do a little stadium wave that about 30 seconds into this is going to travel from this side of the room over here and then back. So we're creating this graceful community of movement and dance together. So first, just individually, I'll guide you through that, and then let's see if we can really read our neighbors as we pass that movement back and forth. The swan. Cute. So imagining your arms as wings and just starting to float up softly. Even if you've never danced before, you're all finding the softness and the grace. Let's listen to this melody line as it floats all the way up. Try that same thing one more time. So really finding the softness. As Balanchine said, you should hear the dance and see the music. They should be so intertwined that we can't separate them. And now again, one of those big rises all the way up. Let's try our stadium wave starting on this side. Beautiful, and come back. Beautiful. Let's try it one more time. Going this way. A little faster, coming back. Nice. Yeah. Can we try from the very front to the back? They can see you, but you can't see the front line, next line. Pass it back, pass it back. Beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful. Now one more breath all together. Just breathing up together, feeling the room moving as one community. And Let your wings float down. Beautiful. And give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you, Jason. That was great. Thank you so much, everyone. That was just gorgeous. Thank you.
Can we just keep going and start the panel an hour from now? That was fabulous. So I took a Parkinson's Dance for PD class here. It's offered here at the Kennedy Center. I think it's weekly for a number of months, and it's a wonderful, wonderful class. I mean, it did me so much good as well. So doesn't it feel? Isn't your mood different now? It's extraordinary, and I feel integrated into my body, which as a singer is something we try to achieve and don't always get there. But
I think dance is music physicalized. So when we think about dance, a lot of people have a fear factor. But when I mention music, I love music. Music, I know I play music all the time. Dance is really just the embodiment, the physical embodiment and expression of the music that we're hearing, and that's what's so fun about it.
And each of those musical selections did bring a completely different feeling into the movement. So tell us about, how did this start, Dance for PD?
We started in 2001. We were approached actually by a member of the community who ran a support group for people with Parkinson's, and she had a vision for members of that group actually dancing together and supporting each other through an artistic experience rather than sitting and talking about Parkinson's, which is what they had been doing until that point. And it was a hunch. We had no research at this point. There's now, I think, more than 47 peer-reviewed studies on the impact of dance and Parkinson's. At that point, we had absolutely nothing. So it was really just a big experiment. We said, yes, we would love to try this. We will provide teachers, we will provide a musician and a studio. Do you think anyone will come? And they did. 6 of them came that first class.
Wow.
So very brave people.
And also, there's a beautiful documentary, in fact, that I saw that was incredibly inspiring. It's called Grace or something?
Capturing Grace.
Capturing Grace. Is it available? Is it something that people can watch?
It is available.
I recommend it.
Yes, it's streaming.
So uplifting.
Yeah.
And talk about the impact of COVID on Dance for PD.
You know, we thought that this program really thrived in the live studio environment where people could see each other, dance together, have the experience that you just had, where you were actually creating art together and creating that sense of community through your art making. And we never would have imagined that that would translate onto a virtual space on Zoom. We started teaching class on Zoom, actually 7 classes a week on Zoom, March of 2020. And we just haven't stopped. The reason we haven't stopped, even though we're all kind of back to previous existence, is that people love having that access. They love being able to come in from the comfort and safety of home. We're now also offering in-person classes, but we have people who do both each week. They take the online class Monday, they come into the studio Wednesday, they're back online Friday. And I think when we're talking about a population that has challenges with mobility, with transportation, with getting out of the house, having something that they can tune into so easily that provides not just the physical engagement that you all experience, but actually also a social engagement with the teaching artist, with each other. We always have conversation on Zoom. It's never just the class and we end, right? We have a breakout room. It's been an incredibly effective way to bring more people into the Dance for Parkinson's family.
And what are the numbers? I mean, how many people can join you on a Zoom?
Well, the Zoom limit is 300. I think the largest class I've had is 270, sort of at the peak of the pandemic. Every week I have about 100 people coming in. And what's amazing, Renee, is that they're coming in not just from New York and Washington and the US, but they're coming in from the UK, from India, from South Africa. We have some people who stay up late and join from Japan. It's a global community.
And teaching teachers, when you were on the webinar during the pandemic, you talked about teaching 20 teachers in Brooklyn to now 700 or 800 around the world. And we saw this in Beijing. I was in China around that time.
You know, it's incredible to see dance educators who often feel somewhat limited in how they can serve a community. They're maybe in a school or they're in a university setting, but to actually engage with the community in a way that can support well-being, support health through the lifespan is incredibly rewarding for us as dance educators and teaching artists. So we have people who are either coming to it because they want to find a new direction in their teaching. They have a family member with Parkinson's, or a member of the community did what Oli did. She came to them, or a person comes to them and says, hey, I read about this program, can you start it in my community? And that's the most beautiful part of this, is it really is a collaboration between the teaching artist community and the Parkinson's community. Wherever it springs up, that collaboration is incredibly robust.
I think these classes are also fantastic for us as we age, and so it would be fantastic to have them in every facility in the country. They're just magnificent. So, Susan, we want to talk to you about the NeuroArts Blueprint. Tell us about the report and Building Resource Center, too.
Sure. Well, it's wonderful to be here, and thank you for helping us move our bodies. I'm always amazed in this work that artists have always gotten there first, and that science is really catching up, and that's pretty amazing. It's a great place to lead and follow, as dancers do. So I'm at Johns Hopkins in the School of Medicine, which is a really uncommon place to be interested in the arts, you might think. But as it turns out, we have a very visionary donor. Her name is Marilyn Peterson. I talk about her all the time because I think she, in large part, is responsible for initiating certainly the work at Hopkins, and I think fueling a lot of the work around this area of arts and health through the lens of research. So around 2017, we started to get inquiries all over the world about this work of arts and health, arts and well-being, arts and learning. And a colleague said to me, I feel like the field is ripe, that people in public health, in neurology, in rehabilitation, in thinking about this work in disease-related models, but also for well-being, it's everywhere. And so we went to the Aspen Institute, and tonight my colleague Ruth Katz is here, who is my co-director. I went down with a colleague and said, we're doing this work at Hopkins. We're trying to think about translating research into practice and really kind of trying to think about a model for that. And, if you think about the arts, they're probably the most generative work as opposed to sort of linear thinking. And so how do you bring lots of fields, team science together to really understand a problem and create a pathway for practice? And Ruth said, the Aspen Institute is interested in science, they're interested in the arts, and we think there's a health and society opportunity here. So we started to talk to people all over the world, and in 2019 launched the NeuroArts Blueprint, which is a 5-year initiative, and the goal is to really make the arts and health, NeuroArts, a thing, and really create a sustainable model for that, which, as it turns out, is not easy to do. And Francis will talk about that. But what we're really interested in is making medicine and public health with the arts something that becomes part of the mainstream. So very briefly, there are 5 recommendations that have come out of the blueprint. One is looking at enhancing rigorous research and making sure that we're studying the arts the way they need to be studied. 2 is honoring the practitioners. So there are many kinds of practitioners: creative arts therapists, rehabilitation artists, scientists, neurologists, public health folks, educators, really thinking about that continuum of practitioner and how do you build pathways and career paths in that field. And then the 3rd is looking at policy. The 4th is funding, sustainable funding, both public and private. And the last is really looking at communications. How do we talk to each other in these very diverse, often siloed fields? And how do we talk to the general public? And how does the general public be able to activate this work very immediately and use what we know about the science of the arts?
It's fantastic, and I've been so thrilled to be part of this and see this growth and appreciation, understanding, and also the breadth of what the NeuroArts Blueprint is and what it embraces, because your field is neuroaesthetics. Can you talk about what that field is? What does that mean?
So, and Renee, I should have pointed out, is the co-chair of the NeuroArts Blueprint Initiative, along with Eric Nestler at Mount Sinai. So we have the marriage of arts and sciences, which is really important because together that really creates an amazing bond. One of the initiatives that we're working on is something called the NeuroArts Resource Center. And I think about this as a global watering hole. So no matter where you are in the world, you can come to this virtual watering hole that will be ready for business at the end of this calendar year. And you can say, I'm looking to find information about Parkinson's in Botswana, and I'd like to be able to find researchers that are really interested in early onset Parkinson's. You can type that in as a search, and you'll be able to pull up those resources. And so it's the kind of place where we can find each other, we can find research, we can find practitioners, we can also find funders, policy, and sort of affinity groups that are interested in working with each other. So it might be that you're in Kansas City and you're interested in knowing what's happening in Louisville because you've heard that there's some things happening. So the ability to bring people together in a really dynamic way.
And talk about creating a field. What does that mean? Because that's one of the really core points.
Yeah, so, you know, creating a field is a whole new sort of way of thinking about a paradigm shift. So as I said earlier, there are people, many army of artists, practitioners, and researchers working in this field. They often don't know each other because they're in different environments, and there is not the sustainability aspect. And so, like bioethics or women's health, even neuroscience is only, 75 years old? 100, I mean, but not, this technology has really driven the work. Creating a new field requires foundational sort of tent poles of being able to think about how do you build the research, how do you think about policy, how do you think about funding. So the blueprint really is a 5-year initiative that's goal is to set up those tent poles, create the foundational mechanisms to be able to really bring this work forward. And science builds on science. It builds on rigor. It builds on being able to replicate work. And so the idea is to be able to create these frameworks and these models that allow us to really build a long-term frame and to have the infrastructure in place to be able to do that.
And we're going to talk about medical research and kind of what the pieces are that go into that, but talk about AARP and KPMG and that piece for Alzheimer's disease.
Sure. So we talk about in the blueprint this idea of ways of knowing. So how do we know different information? One way of knowing is through neurobiological research. Other ways might be public health, qualitative work, or lived experience, people who are experiencing something. We're also interested in understanding the economic impact of the arts on health. So there haven't been a lot of economic models that have been developed to really understand what is that economic return on investment. So about 2 years ago, we started working with KPMG, which is an accounting firm that thinks about building really complex, dynamic financial models. And we looked at one thing. We looked at singing and Alzheimer's. And if we were to put a singing model in place for people with Alzheimer's and their caregivers, what would the financial return on investment be? Would there even be a financial return? And what we found in a very narrow slice is that there would be a 3-to-1 return on just singing and Alzheimer's. So that's pretty phenomenal. Now we've gone back and we're doing a second study, which is called the true value analysis. So this is saying not just what's the financial return for Alzheimer's and singing, but what about the caregiver? What about the organization where someone might be living? What about the societal return? What about the pro-social return? So we think that the return on the investment there is going to be significantly greater. And that's just one more piece of evidence, data, that we can bring to bear on policymakers who are making really big decisions about how to spend money in this country, but also around the world.
Fantastic. So Google NeuroArts Blueprint, Dance for PD. We're going to just go around and give you lots of homework. This is all, there's so much to grasp, and we're just touching on all of these things. So Dr. Collins, I'm so excited that you're with us. We did a panel here some years ago, right, with Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, and here we are again, and it's incredible what's happened to all of this work in the meantime. So tell us why the NIH has been interested in studying music and adding it to the research that you already do, and in fact that you're funding it now.
We are indeed. It's a privilege to be here with this remarkable panel. Renee and I met about 7 years ago, and I won't go into that origin story, but it's a good story, and basically discovered that we both had this dream of how to bring together music and health. And I'm a physician, but I'm also an amateur musician, and the idea of being able to have those parts of who I am actually connect with each other in a way that might actually help people who are suffering from various illnesses, that just seemed like something I've got to go after. And I found there were a lot of people around me at NIH, you'll hear from one of them in a minute, Dr. Edwards, who had that same sense, but we hadn't really pulled it all together. And we already knew there were some things coming in this area of neuroscience that looked pretty interesting, that we might be able to take this whole understanding of how music interacts with your brain and take it to another level. There was initial information which I think is absolutely fascinating. Just think about this a minute. When you look at the way in which your brain responds to sound, if it's a musical tone, it's a slightly different part of your acoustic cortex that grabs onto that than if it was street noise or somebody just speaking to you. Your brain has a music room. Think about that. That wouldn't be there if it wasn't there for a really important purpose. And of course, we can all reflect upon the way in which music has influenced us in our own lives and down through history, that music can bring us together. It can sometimes comfort us in sorrow. It can sometimes motivate people. You go to an athletic contest, you have a fight song. Nobody gives a fight speech. You give a fight song, and it revs everybody up, and they get excited. And every university has to have, their alma mater that brings people together. What's going on there? Well, basically, we're learning more about that from the neuroscience perspective, and there's connections there. So when a particular kind of music hits your brain, and maybe it's something that really moves you, it travels through other pathways, and your ventral striatum just gets all excited and releases a lot of dopamine. That's when you get a chill from hearing something that particularly moves you. But that's very sort of superficial, what I just described. We need to understand that much better because we know the field of music therapy has provided benefit to people over decades, but we really don't quite know how it works. And therefore, we don't know how to make it better. And a lot of music therapy has just been, well, let's try this and see what happens. And there hasn't been the kind of scientific strategy, nor has there been this neuroscience base to land it on, and now there is. So working with Renee and a whole bunch of other remarkable people, including here at the Kennedy Center, including the National Endowment for the Arts, we put together something called Music and Health, or sometimes called Sound Health, and which is now the source of some $20 million of research funding that NIH has put together to try to find out really how do these things work so that we could do a better job of helping people through musical interventions. And that should be something that we could all care about a lot. And it's across the lifespan. It might be you're trying to understand how better to use music to improve childhood education. We know there's a connection there. Musical training seems to also connect with better language skills. Well, maybe we ought to have more music in the schools instead of less. It's about all kinds of conditions that benefit in ways that we don't quite understand from music interventions. PTSD in adults, certainly chronic pain syndromes, and certainly in the older folks, the Parkinson's we just heard about, and you experienced how that interfaced with your personhood. Having that music and that rhythm obviously had an effect on you. Can we channel that even more effectively? And what about dementia? Certainly we know this is such an incredible challenge. You just heard from Susan about how there's an estimate here that this actually would save healthcare dollars if we could do more of it. And I don't know if you've ever seen an example of what happens with somebody who is really in a pretty tough place as far as the later stages of dementia, and where music taps into some different circuit and something else happens. Can we play that video of Henry for a minute, please?
His name is Henry Dreyer.
Uh-huh.
And I'm looking more or less for religious music for him.
Okay.
Because he enjoys music and he always quotes in the Bible. So I'd rather have that for him.
We first see Henry inert, maybe depressed, unresponsive, and almost unalive.
Henry.
Yeah.
Henry.
Yes, Joe.
I found your music. You want your music now?
What do you want me?
Let's try your music, okay? And then you tell me if it's too loud or not.
Then he is given an iPod containing, we know, his favorite music. immediately he lights up. His face assumes expression, his eyes open wide. He starts to sing and to rock and to move his arms, and he's being animated by the music.
And he used to always sit on the unit with his head like this. He didn't really talk to much people. And then when I introduced the music to him, this is his reaction ever since.
The philosopher Kant once called music the quickening art, and Henry is being quickened, he's being brought to life.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take the music for 1 second, okay? Just to ask you a few questions. Okay?
Now watch this.
I'm gonna give it back to you.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
The effect of this doesn't stop, because when the headphones are taken off, Henry, normally mute and virtually unable to answer the simplest yes or no questions, is quite voluble.
Henry.
Yeah.
Do you like the iPod? Do you like the music you're hearing?
Yes.
Tell me about your music.
Well, I don't have none, I mean.
Do you like music?
Yeah, I'm crazy about music. You play beautiful music, beautiful sound. Beautiful.
Did you play music when you were, did you like music when you were young?
Yes, I went to big dances and things.
What was your favorite music when you were young?
Well, I guess, Cab Calloway was my #1 band guy I liked.
What's your favorite Cab Calloway song?
Oh, I'll be home there for Christmas. Oh, you can count and plan on me with plenty of snow, mistletoe, present wrapped around your tree. Ow!
So in some sense, Henry is restored to himself. He has remembered who he is, and he's reacquired his identity for a while through the power of music.
What does music do to you?
It give me the feeling of love, no man. Figure right now the world need to come into music, singing. You got beautiful music here. Beautiful, oh, lovely. And I feel the band of love, dream. Lord came to me, made me holy. I'm a holy man. So he gave me this sound. I'll just say, I meet you. Let me see. Rosalie, won't you love me? Rosalie, won't you be sweet and kind?
With this beautiful new technology, you can have all the music which is significant for you in something as big as a mansion.
How about that? Do you see the transformation brought about by activating that part of the brain that responded to music, and it stayed there activated after the music was turned off? That's the kind of thing that is being explored. But yet we don't know nearly enough about it. If you look at the research literature, how many studies have been done on music therapy for Alzheimer's in a really rigorous way, so you can say confidently what worked and what didn't? It's very, very few. So NIH aims to try to upgrade that approach so we can be more certain of the results. And for that, the next speaker is going to tell you more about how we're going to make that happen.
Well, the film is Alive Inside. Have any of you seen it? Familiar with it a little bit? A few of you have. Okay, I think it's on YouTube, and it's a very moving film. It's extraordinary. Of course, that was Dr. Oliver Sacks. Very exciting. So, Emmeline, you have created something that is really going to address what Dr. Collins is talking about, this need for rigorous research. Before we talk about the toolkit, can you just, any of you speak up? What does that mean? What is rigorous research, and how do you define that?
So at the NIH, we actually, So at the NIH, when you are actually submitting a proposal to do research,
Microphone, right there.
You really need to follow certain guidelines. And when we say rigorous research, we mean that you have to have a research question you have to have the hypothesis and also have a model to design the study that you're proposing. And what has happened is that, as you've seen, the promise of using music or dance as a therapeutic tool has really been very exciting, but the research really has to catch up. And that is why we feel that we needed to actually intervene in a way and develop a toolkit that would provide guidelines and recommendation to researchers and practitioners of how to do this kind of intervention. So that's what the toolkit is all about. So the way that we came about this initiative is that we collaborated with the Renée Fleming Foundation and the NIH, and we brought together groups of experts in various disciplines, neuroscientists, experts in behavioral intervention development, expert on clinical trialists. We also brought advocacy group and art organization, as well as patients. And we actually had a series of workshops where we came up with a consensus process that actually allowed us to determine what is it that is important to include in any intervention so that the research can be rigorous, as you've heard earlier, that we can replicate the outcome, that it's going to be easily accepted by the population that we're studying, and also to collect the data in a way that allows that you can compare different studies. So that's what the toolkit is about. So what we've done also was to actually put it in a policy framework, and we have published this information in the journal Neurology. And so right now what we're doing is trying to encourage and disseminate that information to researchers so that if they come to the National Institute of Health for funding, they need to actually include those guidelines and recommendations that we have agreed upon.
It's so brilliant that you've created a template for researchers around the country and around the world to follow so that the research can be accepted and validated, because there's no chance of this ever being covered in the future if it isn't. So talk about the process. So you start with the rationale, and I've watched this happen a little bit. I got to sit in on one of these presentations where lots of researchers described the study they had designed. And it seemed to me like the simpler ones worked better. And it's because you're creating this building block wall of research that's...
So as part of the toolkit, we have come up with a series of building blocks or common data element that needs to be included in the interventions. So a lot of time, people don't actually pay attention to what is the actual intervention. It could be singing, it could be listening to music. Also, it could be passive engagement, just listening, or producing music, playing the piano. So you need to really determine whether or not those different elements are going to be producing a different outcome. So that's one building block, the intervention itself. Then how is it going to be delivered? Is it going to be individually or through a group? Those are areas of research that we really need to narrow down and better understand. We also need to be able to study the right population. So for example, if you're studying Alzheimer's patient, might it be better to start early and have an early stage versus a late stage, because we might not be able to turn the clock back, but we might be able to delay progression of the disease. We also need to have the right control group, meaning you need to compare your disease population to a quote-unquote normal group. And we have investigators that are actually looking at every single aspect of those building blocks. And that's what we need in order to build the evidence. We're going to need to have that rigorous research, because without that, we will not be able to integrate those interventions that are very promising we want to integrate them fully into the healthcare system. And we need that evidence to be done.
And you had a couple of great examples. We're taking questions from you in just a minute. Give us a few examples. You had one from Tampa and one from South Carolina.
So we have a group at the University of South Florida. It's actually funded by the National Endowment of the Arts, where they actually they're comparing the impact of music, whether it's an active engagement, which is playing the piano or doing percussions, or listening to music, which is passive engagement. At the University of, what was it, the other? South Carolina. They're actually using nature sound as a control condition for the musical intervention that they have. So there's a number of really interesting studies that are going on, but what's happening is that they are small, and we need to actually better understand them so that we can scale them up, so that physicians can actually prescribe that kind of intervention. That's what we are after. We want to be able to fully integrate those interventions into our healthcare system.
And it takes a long time, right? I mean, the scaling, all of this is, because I was naive when I was first introduced to this work, and I thought, well, it works, so just let's do it. But that's not how it works.
Well, one of the things you said, I want to just say again, arts by prescription. Can you imagine the idea of going to your doctor and your doctor saying, oh, take 3 waltzes and call me in the morning, right? Like, it's just the idea of being able to have this as another opportunity for health and well-being is extraordinary.
Well, just the looks on your faces as we were doing movement with David, to me, it's the proof right there. It's just, and I felt it too. I felt it along with you. So any questions now? We have a few more minutes. Yes?
First, thank you.
I think there's a microphone back there that we will share.
Thank you so much. Sandra Quinn from the School of Public Health at University of Maryland, and a singer in Encore Creativity for older adults. You've talked about Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, but Susan, you said well-being, and I haven't heard you all speak about, what we know about music and well-being. I know what I know as a singer, but what we know about that and what we need to know, and who's doing some of that work right now?
Well, maybe I'll just say a little bit about that. One of the goals of the blueprint was to bring this information about health and well-being, learning, community development to the general public. So just this March 21st, I helped to co-author a book called Your Brain on Art, How the Arts Transform Us. And there are several chapters that are about well-being. And we are waiting for policy. We are waiting for healthcare providers to fund this work. But you don't have to wait, right? There are things that it's accessible, affordable, and immediate. And so being able to use these art forms in different ways, whether that's for stress relief, and I also say that nature is the most aesthetic art form, right? So getting out to nature. I love that you're using nature sounds as a control, because I think there's a lot that we haven't really understood about nature sound. Just, we come from nature. So thinking more deeply about how do you incorporate humming, singing, dancing, drawing, gardening, the slowest art form, but thinking really about how do you bring this into your everyday life is something that helps to keep us well. And I don't think we talk enough about that yet. We have an opportunity to do that across the lifespan, as Frances said. And so thinking about young children and the resilience, protective quality of the arts for building stronger neural pathways through early learning is also helps us downstream to really prevent things that and create more resiliency. So I think we have a lot of conversations to have.
And children, that's one of the really powerful columns in all of this. I mean, thinking about them creating identity and creativity, and everything that we do in this country and all the successes we have had are fueled by creativity, which can be developed through study of the arts. Another question. And by the way, singing, yes, yes.
Even if you're not good at it, I just want to shout out for the rubbish choirs out there.
Thank you. This was absolutely enlightening. My question is, we didn't hear much about technology companies and the role that they play in this broad initiative. And where are the young data scientists and our computer engineers and cognitive science students? How do we get them interested and attracted to a field like this?
So part of it is by bringing together the neuroscientists who are absolutely populated with all those people who are engineers, technology developers, data scientists, and figure out how we can link that up with this fascination about how the arts intersects with the brain in positive ways. But Susan, you should say something about virtual reality as an example that's already becoming pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the technologists are there. This is really, if you think about 3 concentric circles, it is science and health, arts and technology. And technology does a couple things. One, at the research level, without the Brain Initiative developing, and Francis drove this, developing these new technologies to get inside our heads, we couldn't study the arts. So that's one. 2, interventions, and I'll talk a little bit about virtual reality. And 3, dissemination and scaling. David went around the world with Parkinson's through Zoom, right? So the ability to scale this work. But there's some really great work happening in AI, but also in virtual reality, and I'll just give you 2. One is something that's coming out of UCSF, Adam Ghazali's work on ADHD and virtual reality. So he's using storytelling, narrative, great graphics, and a closed-looped system to help anybody who has ADHD focus and attend better. There's a great program from University of Washington called Snow World, which is for right now for burn victims and pain management. So in this beautiful world of cold snowmen and slides and snow, people are using that to actually use less pain medicine and change their bandages. And there's a theory around it that it has to do more with distraction, right? Like something as simple as distraction. So we're seeing technology show up. Meta Rhythms is another group that's attaching something to your shoe and changing the pace and movement, whether you're a stroke victim. I believe they're also doing other Parkinson's as well. So technology and startups are actually starting to come up all over the place. And I think that's a healthy ecosystem. So and I do a lot of class work at Hopkins and other universities. I have bioengineering always telling me that they're musicians or they're poets or so these young kids are not just one thing, they are many things, and all of them are using arts for mental health, for well-being, and also want to integrate it into their work. So I think it's exciting, a really exciting future.
Yeah, the MIT Media Lab is doing all kinds of work, and it's mainly that they're supporting their students who are having these amazing ideas. And that's a really interesting website to visit and see what they're doing. But I think this field is exploding, actually, with young people. And with certainly, it's so collaborative, as you said. It's those concentric circles, and it's really happening. Another question?
Yeah, I love the world of art and science coming together. My question is, I'm curious how epigenetics, the biology of belief, is playing a part in the research and how we're looking at being more open and innovative to wellness.
A great question. Certainly the Brain Initiative, which is aiming to try to understand both genetics and epigenetics of the brain, those 86 billion neurons you have between your ears, is starting to unravel some of that, because we now have the ability to look at individual cells and ask them, what are you doing, and what is your current state of epigenetic markings on your chromatin? It's very complicated. It's a good thing we have AI to help us make sense of it, because some people think our brains are not complicated enough to understand our brains, and that would be a challenge if we didn't have some help there. But I think we're still early in that process of really trying to put that all together and understand both the genetic drivers of how differences between us, but also the way in which our experience alters the epigenome, which functions then to take a gene, maybe turn it down a little bit, or take another one, turn it up a little bit. This is going to be a good, solid couple of decades of really interesting work. It's a great question.
Let me just add something as well. So our brain is not working in a vacuum. So it's very important to think about the connection between the mind and the body, and this is where integrative health comes into play. And really, we're starting to now study interconnected systems and how the brain is actually interacting with those systems as well.
That's how I became interested in this, was wanting to understand the mind-body connection, because I had so many symptoms relating to performance pressure. And now here I am. I'm really passionate about it. One more question? Actually, we have a few more minutes.
Thank you so much. This is really world-changing, this work. My question is actually a follow-up about the epigenetics. And I'm wondering, you hear people say, that person really has rhythm. And I'm just wondering whether epigenetics can play a part in that. I grew up a pretty pasty white gringo in Miami, but my neighbors always were dancing the salsa, and they would invite me when I was 3 or 4. So I think whatever rhythm I have is probably from that, but I don't know if that's really true.
I think it's probably very likely true, at least in part, because our brains are incredibly responsive to experience during childhood, but all the way through the lifespan. This is not a fixed structure of circuits that just doesn't change. So much of who we are has been shaped by those environmental experiences. Certainly, you can even see in a kid who's had early musical training that was fairly intense, you can scan the brain and you can see that part of the brain is a little larger. It actually has responded not just by some subtle changes, but enough so you can see it on a scan. So all of that tells you that who you are right now was partly in the cards, when sperm met egg, but an awful lot of it happened after that. And as we can figure out more and more how to take advantage of the good parts of that, both for wellness and for helping people manage illness, we're going to be more powerful in that space, with the arts coming with the science to really help all of us live out a much more satisfying kind of life experience. That's what we're trying to do with this combination of disciplines who maybe didn't talk to each other really easily before, and now we're starting to.
How would you answer that, David, about the 3-year-old movement and picking it up?
Well, I think as dancers, we entrain to what's going on around us all the time, and we're taking in influences from our communities, from our teachers, from all around. So I'm not a neuroscientist, so I can't answer on that perspective, but I would say the dancers that I know who come in to, dancing professionally, they're coming with all of that wonderful influence from a very young age and bringing it with them. And the goal from a dance education standpoint is not to train that out, but actually to just diversify the number of styles that a particular dancer can do. So in your case, bringing in that early education, and then if you'd gone on to study ballet, kind of mixing that all together and just giving you such a palette of textures to work with in your movement world.
Well, thank you. We have run out of time. Dr. Collins and I have to run on to a performance together. We should have done it here. That would have been fun. So thank you for joining us, and stay tuned. We will have more of these gatherings. I have to say, I'm honored to be on the stage with this group. What extraordinary minds, experiences. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at the Millennium Stage. For more information about upcoming shows, please check out the Kennedy Center website or Facebook page. At this time, we please ask you to head back to the seating area. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your evening at the Kennedy Center.